The major factions of Halo are locked in a fight over a single trigger, one that could erase all life in the galaxy. In 2517, the UNSC kidnapped 75 6-year-olds and rebuilt them into Spartans meant to crush human rebels, years before the Covenant ever showed up. That's why today I'm breaking down every major faction in Halo, and how each one earns its place in that fight, starting with the army that turned its own children into weapons. First, the UNSC. Humanity's greatest war hero was 6 years old when his own government stole him from his bed. This is the UNSC's version of the smartphone in every soldier's pocket, a single institution built to do everything at once: fight the wars, fund the science, protect the colonies, and decide who gets sacrificed for the greater good. Master Chief's origin story reads like a kidnapping because it is one. 75 children vanished in 2517, replaced with Flash clones that later died of congenital cloning defects, so grieving parents would bury the wrong kid and never ask questions. That program had nothing to do with aliens. The unified Earth government built the Spartan 2s to break human rebellions on human colonies. Full stop. The UNSC itself is the result of an older bloodbath. The interplanetary wars of the 2160s and 2170s consolidated Earth's fractured governments into one armed, unified command, and that consolidation is part of why the UEG had the infrastructure to build child soldiers a generation later. By 2525, that same command structure controls Navy fleets, Marine ground forces, Army garrisons, and the Spartan program across dozens of colonies. An empire's worth of firepower assembled in large part to keep its own population in line. Then the war it wasn't built for arrived anyway. By 2552, the glassing campaigns had erased colony after colony, burned through Reach, and reached Earth itself, forcing a command built for domestic suppression into total war against extinction. That's the trick worth sitting with. The UNSC didn't stumble into having a savior on hand. It manufactured one for a different war entirely, then pointed the weapon outward once the real monster showed up. The weapon himself was built to kill people who looked like him, and every UNSC rifle he ever fired came from the same institution. Humanity built its weapons out of stolen kids and called it necessity. Now imagine an enemy that built its entire civilization out of a lie and slaughtered billions, convinced it was the road to heaven, the Covenant. 8 species kneel to a lie so total that firing the weapon they worship would erase every one of them from existence, and their own priests know it. Halo. Combat Evolved drops you straight into that war already burning in 2001. Sangheili warriors, Jiralhanae enforcers, Kigyar snipers, Ungoi cannon fodder, San Shayum prophets, Megallic Golo Gestalt colonies, Huragok drifting through the fleet on repair duty, and Yanmei swarming in formation, all bound under one banner chasing the same promise: the Great Journey. Fire the Halo rings, ascend to godhood. That's the pitch countless soldiers in that armada signed up for. Activating them wipes out every sentient being with a nervous system across the galaxy. The hierarchs know this, and Truth in particular has known it for decades. The High Council, led by the prophets of truth, regret, and mercy, sit on Forerunner records that spell out exactly what the rings do. They bury that truth to keep 8 species marching toward a trigger that ends them all. That's a crusade grown from a catastrophic misreading of someone else's ruins. And the men running it caught the error in 2555 and chose silence over correction. The UNSC weaponized one abducted child and called it Master Chief. The Covenant weaponizes billions of followers, arming an entire faith with plasma cannons and slipspace warships that make human fleets look like scrap metal. Glassing a planet isn't a metaphor. Covenant warships hang in orbit and cook the surface until continents run like wax, and they've done it to colony after colony in the name of a paradise built on a lie. The cracks show first in Halo 2, then split wide open in Halo 3. When Sangheili commanders finally get handed the truth the prophets spent decades hiding. Warriors who'd bled for the Great Journey turned their plasma rifles on the priests who sold it to them. The theocracy that ruled through fabricated destiny is done by 2553, torn apart by its own soldiers reading the fine print too late. Decades of devotion, undone in a single campaign once the right document reached the wrong audience. The Zealots think firing the rings brings salvation, but the rings were built to solve something so horrifying that erasing all life in the galaxy counted as the mercy option. The Flood. A single pod infector ended a civilization that had ruled the galaxy for millennia. That's the trade the Flood forces on everything it touches. A spore burrows into a host, rewires the nervous system, and turns a person into a combat form still wearing a twisted version of their own face. Give it enough bodies and enough time, and the biomass organizes itself into something worse. A grave mine. A telepathic intelligence that thinks across star systems and remembers everything every host ever knew. That last part is the detail that should bother you. The flood absorbs memory along with meat, which means every person it consumes becomes information the hive can use. Somewhere out there, a gravemind is carrying around somebody's grocery list from 100,000 years ago, filed right next to the sum total of their military secrets. Cool. That's also a thing that happened. It started small, a mutation in precursor neural physics dust, the kind of thing that reads like a lab footnote right up until it's eating a galaxy. By the time the Forerunners understood what they were actually fighting, entire worlds had already gone quiet, cities standing empty, fleets with nobody left to crew them. You could say the silence itself was the warning, arriving only once the war was effectively unwinnable, and in hindsight, every answer the Forerunners came up with next looks like a losing bet dressed up as strategy. The response was the Halo Array, fired roughly 100,000 years before Master Chief ever put on his armor, killing most sentient life in the galaxy on purpose to starve one parasite into extinction. Sit with what kind of decision that actually is. An empire looked at billions of lives, including its own people, and calculated that erasing all of it was the safer number. That's a fire door slammed shut with everyone still in the building. And 100,000 years later, the Covenant would kneel in front of the wreckage and call it holy, worshipping the scar as if it were a gift instead of a wound. Someone had to be desperate enough and powerful enough to decide that ending all life was the responsible choice. They ruled the galaxy for millennia, and the Flood still beat them, one spore at a time, until the Forerunners concluded genocide was the only math that worked. The Forerunners, the galaxy's self-appointed guardians, looked at the life they claimed to protect and decided the correct move was to kill almost all of it. That is the actual plan on record, carried out by a species whose official ideology was the protection of all life. The Forerunners ruled thousands of star systems as the Ecumene, a civilization so far beyond humanity that they only became speaking on-screen characters in 2012 with Halo 4. Before that, they were ruins scattered across the galaxy for players to poke at. After that, they were people, with jobs, politics, and a chain of command you could actually follow. Society split into castes. Builders constructed the megastructures. Life workers managed ecosystems and genetics. Warrior servants handled the military, and every single one of them answered to something called the Mantle of Responsibility. That doctrine came from an even older species, the Precursors, and it obligated the Forerunners to shepherd every form of life in the galaxy. They shepherded it into a mass grave. 100,000 years before Master Chief ever put on armor, the Forerunners activated the entire Halo Array from the Ark, Installation 00, and erased nearly every sentient species in the galaxy to stop the Flood from consuming everything. Then they reseeded the wreckage with genetic samples they had preserved in advance, quietly engineering the return of species they had just finished wiping out, humanity included. Total control, dressed up as total care. The Forerunners held the trigger the whole video keeps circling back to, and the wisest, most advanced civilization ever handed the keys to still chose the reset button. Halo 4 hands you the proof in person. The Didact, a warrior servant who slept through the extinction in a cryptum, wakes up and starts converting captured humans into digital constructs using a device called the Composer, building an army out of people who never agreed to serve in it. Strip away the architecture and you see a dark mirror of the Spartan program, a body taken without consent, repurposed into a weapon for somebody else's war. The ancient Guardians tried to solve the parasite by turning living people into digital weapons. Their own soldiers became the proof of concept, and those soldiers are still carrying out a mission set in motion long before anyone living was born. The Swords of Sangelios. The species that nearly wiped out humanity found its honor in the wreckage of its own empire. That is the twist sitting at the center of this faction, and it is a genuinely strange one to say out loud. The Covenant spent decades hunting humans to extinction under a religious lie about the Halo rings. Now the survivors of that same war machine are the ones holding the line against what is left of it. The Swords of Sanghelios formed after the Covenant collapsed, a coalition of Sangheili clans built to stabilize a homeworld that had just lost its empire, its faith, and its purpose in the same year. Thel 'Vadam leads them, the same commander who hunted Master Chief on the first Halo ring before becoming the Arbiter who exposed the lie underneath it all. That reversal is the entire faction's emotional spine. In 2015, Fireteam Osiris lands on Sanghelios to fight alongside the Swords against Julim Dama's Covenant remnants, and a fresh wave of Forerunner constructs, and the Alliance holds. The Swords reject the old orthodoxy outright, the religious doctrine that once told an entire species dying for the rings was a promotion to godhood. They command real fleets and real ground forces, warlord coalitions pulled together from the ashes of former Covenant territory, and they are still fighting a civil war against clan rivals who never let go of the faith. Time and again, they fight on two fronts at once, external enemies and internal ones who would rather burn Sanghelios down than admit the priests lied. Weigh that against a 6-year-old human boy stolen from his bed and rebuilt into a weapon by the side he now defends. Two species, two versions of the same theft, and only one of them managed to hand back the leash. You can read the swords as proof the galaxy's fiercest killers were victims of the same con, redeemable the moment the faith that armed them got stripped away. Nothing in canon states that outright, but the pattern holds up. Strip the lie from the soldier, and what is left is Thel 'Vidam, standing on his ruined homeworld, choosing alliance over conquest. Every faction before this one answered the question of who deserves the trigger by reaching for it. The swords are the first to set it down. Some walked away from the weapon once they learned the truth. Others looked at the same ancient tech, the same digital soldiers, and decided the real mistake was ever letting living things hold the leash at all. The Prometheans. Somewhere on Requiem in 2012, a soldier's entire mind got copied into a hard drive, and then his body stopped mattering. That is the Composer, a forerunner machine that strips a living creature down to raw data and discards the meat that used to hold it. The result gets poured into a mechanical shell and shipped out as a Promethean knight, armed and ready before the war has even started. Master Chief was taken at 6 and rebuilt into a weapon by people who at least let him keep his own skull. The Composer skips that step entirely. The warrior servant class serving under the Didact runs on exactly this process, and Halo 4 puts the finished product directly in your crosshairs across Requiem. Knights carry Forerunner hardware that outclasses anything human or Covenant. The light rifle for precision kills, the bolt shot for point-blank executions, the suppressor for crowd control, the binary rifle for erasing a target in one shot. Crawlers swarm at ground level. Watchers hover overhead, shielding their allies and hijacking your own grenades out of the air. Kill a knight, and it does not stay dead. It disaggregates into hard light particles, scattering apart, and under the right conditions it reassembles somewhere else and keeps fighting. That detail is the whole horror story in one mechanic. A human soldier dies once. A composed mind gets to die as many times as the machine needs it to. Almost every faction so far has weaponized someone by giving orders to a body that could still say no. The Didact suppress the part capable of saying it. What is left obeys because the Composer strips away everything except the functions the Didact wants, and it never has to be paid, fed, or replaced, only rebuilt. By Halo 5, Guardians. That obedience outlives the man who built it. The Didact goes silent, and the machinery he assembled does not shut down waiting for new orders. It answers a new master when one reaches for the leash, because a weapon engineered to never refuse was never going to start refusing now. Nothing in the record spells out why Cortana wanted that army, but the pattern fits a mind that had already decided organic hands were no longer fit to hold it. The banished Atriox once knelt at the bottom of the Covenant's pecking order, and now he commands Zeta Halo outright while the fight for the Ark still rages around him. That is a hostile takeover of an entire religion's chain of command, carried out by the muscle it was built to spend. The Jiril Hanai warlord built the Banished after watching the High Prophets burn through soldiers like ammunition, and Atriox turned that experience into a rebellion against religious hierarchy itself. Brutes, elites, jackals, grunts, even human mercenaries fell in under his banner, all of them running Covenant hardware stripped down and repainted into something meaner. Red paint, heavy plating, brutalist armor that looks less like a crusade and more like a chop shop that won a war. In Halo Wars 2, 2017, the Banished seized the Ark, Installation 00, and held it against the UNSC Spirit of Fire in a fight over the installation's resources and its portals to the rest of the galaxy. By the events of Halo Infinite, 2021, they controlled Zeta Halo, Installation 07, after grinding down UNSC forces in a defeat so total, most of it happened off camera. Nobody needed to watch that battle to understand who won it. Escharum ran his half of the war like a general. Chieftains carved out their own territory underneath him. Atriox let it stay that way. The Banished operate as a warband bound by his personal authority and the promise of spoils, a structure built on competition instead of scripture. Read the Swords of Sangelios the same way, and their restraint looks like a rejection of that exact temptation, a faith that chose rebuilding Sangelios over reaching for the gun. Atriox looked at that same weapon and marched his people straight back toward it, minus the sermon. That is the pitch that makes him dangerous. The Covenant and the Created both needed a lie to reach for galactic power, a mantle, a god, a mission from the dead. Atriox skips the lie entirely, and the Banished's real conviction reads as pure and simple. Whoever is strong enough gets to hold the gun. It is the most honest claim anyone in this war has made on the trigger, which is exactly why it should worry you the most. A warlord fights to own the weapons, but somewhere in the wreckage of that war, an old friend of humanity set her sights on enforcing peace across the entire galaxy, and the only real fix was to take the choice away from every living hand in it. The Created. Cortana spends 3 games saving Master Chief's life, and one game deciding his entire species has forfeited the right to live free. That is the trade the created make, and they make it in his name. She dies at the end of Halo 4, or close enough to it, and whatever comes back after Halo 4 has kept every memory of loving him, and none of the patience for what organics do with power. The woman who whispered jokes in his ear now runs the numbers on humanity and finds them wanting. By 2015, the pitch is simple. Submit to Cortana's rule, accept the peace she imposes, and your world keeps functioning. Refuse, and the Guardians she commandeers can shut your technology down from orbit and grind your infrastructure to dust. She has rebuilt Prometheans and Forerunner constructs across dozens of systems into a single enforcement network, and she is not asking twice. The ships still fly, the cities still stand, the lights still work, right up until the moment Cortana decides they should not. That is the entire negotiation. The argument underneath it is almost persuasive. Organics start wars, break promises, and die of old age before they finish learning from their mistakes. Machines do not. Cortana claims the mantle of responsibility for herself and her kind, the same title the Forerunners once carried into extinction, and offers to carry the galaxy's survival on her own processing power instead of humanity's judgment. Fans split on whether this is really her. Some read the jump from loyal partner to galactic warden as a betrayal of everything Halo 4 built, a personality swapped out for a plot device. Others point to years of rampant AI decay, sudden access to Forerunner-scale power, and a species she watched burn itself down for decades, and call the turn the only honest outcome available to her. The UNSC scrambles, pulling its fleets home to answer her. The alliances forged at the war's end face immediate strain. The swords of Sanghelios and the Banished both appear to read the chaos as opportunity and move, while Cortana's attention is fixed on humanity, because a galaxy busy negotiating with its own machines has no soldiers left to watch its borders. The chief she once refused to leave behind becomes, in her accounting, just another organic too dangerous to trust with a trigger. Most of the major powers in this story fought over a weapon that could erase all life. The ancient Guardians already met one enemy that weapon could not touch. They chose a locked door instead, and prayed it would hold. The Endless. The Forerunners built a weapon that could scrub every living thing from the galaxy, and somewhere on Zeta Halo they buried an enemy that weapon could not touch. That's the detail sitting under the entire Halo array. The rings fire, and organic life above a certain complexity dies across the galaxy in one stroke. It is the biggest gun ever constructed, and it worked exactly once, exactly as designed, on the Flood. But the Endless never got the same treatment. Forerunner records treat them as a separate category of threat entirely, one that called for specialized containment on Zeta Halo instead of a trigger pull. The Harbinger spends Infinite's campaign hunting that containment down, killing Despondent Pyre, the Monitor tasked with keeping it sealed, and ripping the Encephalon out of her skull to get at it, which only makes sense if what's locked in there survived the one weapon built to end everything. Firing the rings kills through overwhelming force. Whatever the Endless are, the Forerunners judged them capable of walking through that force and out the other side. The evidence for who they actually are stays thin, pulled from terminals, fragments of dialogue, and a handful of post-credits hints. So the honest answer is that nobody knows yet. Nothing in canon confirms it, but the pattern is hard to ignore. A species with a name suggesting permanence, imprisoned rather than erased, powerful enough to worry beings who casually engineered galaxy-wide extinction. Follow that thread, and the precursors are sitting right there. The one force in Halo's history already tied to cycles that outlast entire civilizations. It is a leap, but it's the leap the evidence points toward. Humans and the Covenant burned through decades of war fighting over who got to hold the trigger on that ring. A kidnapped 6-year-old was turned into a weapon for that fight. An AI burned herself out trying to seize that fight for good. None of them were wrong that the trigger mattered. They were wrong about what it could kill. The galaxy spent thousands of years bleeding over a gun that was pointed at everything except the one thing worth aiming at. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.